Hey there, I'm Di, and today there will be paint, there will be clay, lots of mistakes will be made, but in the end, I think I've ended up with some pretty fun pieces. So let's dive into this. I wanted to use something from my stuff that I'm keeping to hopefully customise one day, but haven't touched in a very long time, so I better start using it box. I've got all sorts of stuff in here. Thrift shop items, blank paintable stuff, squishies. There's lots of good options, but today I'm gonna use these two candy jars. They had terrible tasting marshmallows in them, but I like the shape of them, so I kept them. First step was to remove the labels, which was a bit of a mission and struggle, but once I busted out the dissolve it, the problem was solved. Did you like that joke, did you? I want to completely transform the shorter jar using clay. Surprise, surprise, Di's using clay today. I opted to use the Fimo air dry clay as I thought it would be the best option. But I did learn something about air dry clay during this process. Well, actually, it wasn't new information, it was just old information that I'd completely forgotten about. And during this makeover, I remembered. And had I remembered beforehand, I would not have used the Fimo, but I'll go more into that later. When I looked at this squat curving container, it for some reason reminded me of a beehive. So that's what I'm going to try and make. I made some long coils of clay, flattened them out just slightly, then wrapped it around the container. Then I smoothed the join, plus squished and smoothed the bottom part to form around the base of the jar. For the next coil, I tried to make it slightly smaller than the first, so the beehive shape would look like it was angling in slightly, rather than going straight up and down. To help me get this thing nice and smooth, I rigged up a little device for myself. The round spinny thing is a cake stand, and that thing on there is an empty tape roll. Then I stuck the jar inside it upside down and taped all three pieces together. Looks dodgy as, but gee, it worked well, and this process was thoroughly enjoyable. Now this next bit I should probably explain. So I'm really getting into my clay, and I'm trying to learn new techniques. I've also watched quite a few episodes of The Great Pottery Throwdown. It's a fantastic British pottery show where people compete to become the master potter. And on that show they do a technique called pulling. It's often used to make handles for mugs. Well, the next coil for the beehive, I wanted it to be flatter than the others to continue that inward angle shape of the hive, so I thought I would give pulling a go. And watching the footage back, it's uncomfortable to watch. Don't try and tell me you don't know what I'm talking about. Don't get me wrong, the technique worked beautifully and I love the result. Turns out I'm great at pulling. It just, well, don't judge me for what you're saying. It's a legit pottery technique. And yes, I realise I am a grown-ass woman, but I am still completely immature with the humour of a juvenile. The next day, I worked on the lid of the jar. I still wanted the jar to function, be able to screw the top on and off. So I left a gap where it joins to the base and added in 2 more coils of clay. You may have noticed on the dried pieces is a lot of cracking, and that's what I was talking about earlier. Fimo, when you attach it to an existing object like this, will crack as it dries due to the clay shrinking. However, Das air dry clay, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it, does not seem to have this problem. To fix this mess, I'm going to use some joint compound. I've used this technique before when I made Henry the Mushy Lamp, and I really liked how it worked. I can use it here to fill in all the gaps and cracks, smooth out the rougher areas, and rework some of the shapes I'm not happy with. The best way to do this is put on more compound than you actually need. Then slowly take the compound away with a damp paintbrush, forming the desired shape in the process. I ended up attaching the jar to the cake stand again, using double-sided tape this time. I was able to spin the jar and get that really even, smooth shape. This was super satisfying to do and made the process so much easier. I never thought I would get into doing clay on a wheel, and I know this is nothing like that, but doing this has got me very interested in giving pottery on a wheel a go. I could imagine making smaller versions of these beehives completely out of clay. To paint this beehive, I'm going to use a mixture that I learnt from watching Tina Lay. In this particular episode, she was turning trash into home decor. To make a cardboard tray look like stone or clay, she painted it with a mix of paint and plaster of Paris. I don't have plaster of Paris, but I do have permastone, which I think will be similar. So I mix that into a deep yellow paint and then give the entire beehive a generous dose of the mixture. This will hopefully help it retain that stone-looking texture, plus it will unify the entire surface as I go over the exposed plastic parts. Being that the mix is quite thick, hopefully it will fill in some of those last bumps that reappeared as the joint compound dried. I used a brown version of the paint mix to accentuate the creviced areas of the hive, and I tried to apply it while the yellow paint was still a little wet so I could blend it out. I'm not aiming for perfection because, well, it just takes too damn long. Plus, I'm trying very hard this year to embrace imperfections, as I think they make pieces more interesting. After everything was dry, I finally realised I had forgotten to do something from my original plan. And that was to make a hole for the bees to come in and out of. You know, like those real cartoony beehives. I very nearly decided to just let it be, but I thought, how hard can it be to cut a hole into completely dried clay? I should have known better, as I've done strength tests on the Fimo before and I know it's pretty strong. But I traced on a simple arch shape, then using a utility knife, I started hacking away. A few cuts in, and I was seriously questioning if I should have done this, but it was too late to go back, it was looking a hot mess, so it was just best that I pushed on and tried to make it work. Once I had painted over it with the thick textured paint, it ended up looking just fine. While I let that get all nice and dry, let's start on the next jar. First, I coated the entire thing in Mod Podge. I thought this would help the paint adhere better to the plastic, but it turned out to be a completely useless step as I did a scratch test once it was dried and it just scratched straight off. Well, it's on there now, so I'm not fixing it. I gave it a base coat of a nice blue colour. Then for the next coat, I mixed in the permastone to the paint. I really like the surface finish of the beehive, so I wanted this one to have the same texture. I also really like this shade of blue, but I don't think it ended up being the right colour for this project, as I'm going to be covering the whole thing in a red and green strawberry plant, and those two colours on the blue just didn't complement it well. That's mistake number 2 so far for this jar. And rather than paint the strawberry plant on, yep, you guessed it, I'm going to make it out of clay. First, I make 3 strawberries out of polymer clay. I'm using polymer to make the strawberries first, as I'm gonna turn them into a push mold. That way, I don't have to sit here and make a dozen strawberries with all those little seeds. I can just make 3 and then push air dry clay into the mold to create lots of strawberries fast. I get those baked, plus I made some strawberry leaves and a little flower. I mix up some permastone powder with water, pour it into a suitable container, then I wait and watch for the mixture to slightly thicken. Once I think it's right, I carefully place the items into the mix. I only want them to go halfway down. That way I should be able to remove the items, leaving behind an impression of the berries, leaves and flower. Once the permastone is set, I carefully remove the flower and leaves. Then I try to remove the strawberries and I run into some serious trouble. Those little buggers are in there good. I did wonder if this might happen, being that there was some crevices on the strawberries that the permastone would have latched onto. Plus, I think they went in just a little over halfway. I struggled for ages, managed to get one out and broke the mould in the process. So all that effort to save myself time, and I'll have to sculpt each strawberry anyway. Let's move on to the next mistake. How many mistakes is that now? 4? 5? I don't know, I'm losing count, along with my sanity. I want to make thin vines and stems draping all over the jar. First, I tried rolling out some DAS clay. I learned from the beehive I should be using DAS so the clay won't crack off the surface. But I wasn't happy with how the vines were looking and the coils kept breaking apart, which was frustrating me. So I decided to whip up some joint compound and green paint. Then I rigged up a piping bag made out of a Ziploc bag and piping tip, all taped together, and I piped on the vines instead. This was terrible. I'm so glad I'm not a cake decorator because this was just slightly frustrating to do. and when it dried, it was too brittle and kept breaking apart, which is exactly what I was trying to avoid in the first place. I should have just stuck with the DAS coils. Yes, they were frustrating, but it would have been far stronger in the end. While the vines dried, I go to work on making the strawberries. I had a lot to make, but I only wanted to attach strawberry halves to the jar so that the flat side would sit flush with the jar surface. That meant I could just make a whole strawberry and then cut it in half. I couldn't be bothered making dozens of the little strawberry seeds, so I'll just paint those on later. For the leaves and flowers, I was able to use the push mould, which did speed up the process quite a lot. Once I made enough, it was just a matter of going around and attaching everything with glue. Now, I did think about using restraint and making this thing a bit more refined, with just a few strawberries and leaves, but since it's not going to be decor for my house, and it's just going to be a fun item in my craft room, I thought, why not go all out? Let's load this thing up and make it really colourful and busy. More is more approach. Part of this mindset was because things were not going well for it. It wasn't looking as nice as I wanted, so I just thought I'll confuse the eyes and try and distract people from the dodgy details by just throwing heaps on it. While that jar takes a day or two to dry, I burst into some new resin I brought to finish the beehive. The UV resins I own aren't great, so I'm gonna try this one my husband found from a Perth woodworking shop online. And yes, it turned out to be brilliant, so much better than what I've got and so much cheaper. Plus I got a more powerful UV light to speed things up. I want to mix in some yellow and red inks, plus just a little dark gold mica powder to create a shimmery golden honey to drip all over the beehive. I only used a little of the mica, plus I applied the drips in thin layers, curing in between each one, as I wanted to make sure the resin was curing all the way through. It was a lengthy process, and I know honey is not shimmery like this, but I love how it looks. And what is a beehive without any bees? Well, I suppose it's just a hive. So I'm gonna make some bees out of air dry clay. I just shape out the little bee figures, 5 in all, then once they are dried completely, I paint them a nice bright yellow and black so they will stand out against the deeper yellow of the hive. When I sculpted them, I left 2 indents on either side of the bee body so I can attach the wings. For the wings, I sculpted them out of polymer clay first. Then I used a 2-part silicone putty to make a mould. After a few hours, the mould was cured and I can remove the wings. Then I mix up some more resin with just a little white mica powder, pour it into the mould and blast it with a UV lamp. I must have actually put more mica in than I thought though, because when I removed them, the underside was still wet. But a quick blast with the UV light cures the rest of the resin. Then it's just a matter of using some more resin to set the wings in place on the body. The final step to finish the beehive is to attach the bees. I initially used araldite to attach them, but I think my ratio of this 2-part 5-minute epoxy adhesive must have been off because it was not curing as quickly as it should. And by this point I had completely run out of patience, so I just bunged them on there with super glue. I'm sure they will fall off at some point, but I can always bust out the hot glue gun to fix them up. With all the clay pieces dry on the strawberry jar, I can get it painted. I would normally gesso my clay pieces before painting, but there is no way I'm going to be gessoing all those little details. This piece just isn't that important to me. I mean, it's not like I'm going to throw it away or anything, and I'll keep it on display somewhere in my art room, but this project was more about just having a play and experimenting and having some fun. But I'm not getting overly caught up with fixing any little problems, like those vines that have been breaking off all over the place. I'm not going to make new ones, I just paint in the vine where pieces are missing. It's fine. I'm hoping the busyness of this piece will distract the eye from all the imperfections. But while both jars are not perfect, they have given me some ideas for pieces I could make with my earthenware clay and kiln. Little jars or containers in the shape of a beehive and extra busy strawberry trinket dishes. I haven't got a spinning wheel, but I'm definitely interested in giving it a go. Anyway, I just have to add on the last few details, some strawberry seeds and dry brushing to bring out the texture of the leaves, and that should do it. Let us do the reveal. Microphone's working, camera's rolling. Go down a little bit. Let's look at the strawberry container. Look, so many things went wrong with this one, but I don't care. I still think it looks pretty cool, even though I don't like the colours. The colours are just clashing and not in a good way. Yeah, I mean, it's still fun. I still like it regardless of all its flaws and its bad colours. And I'd love to give something like this a go again. I always say that. I want to do this again. Do I ever get to it? No. So let's move on to the next jar. We have the very cute beehive. Now, I love this. It came out so good. It's a little bit rough here and there, but I think that just adds to the charm of it. I love all the dripping honey and the little bees with their resin wings, and I just love it. All the little bees. And they're just bees. They're not Bonnie the bee. Not even close to Bonnie the bee. They're just bees. Hope you enjoyed watching me recycle empty marshmallow containers into two very interesting jars. And hope to see you next time.